Hi friends, welcome back to UPSC IAS Prelims 2019 Current Affairs Revision Module. So this Current Affairs Revision Module pertains to the events of polity, and this is the second module with relation to polity. Let us start with the events for the day. The issue starts with Northeast Autonomous Councils. This is an important topic because what happened was recently 125th Constitutional Amendment Bill was introduced in the Rajya Sabha. So what is this Northeast Autonomous Council basically about? Now what is the issue is that there is going to be an expansion of powers with regard to the Autonomous Council. So first of all, you need to understand about what is this Autonomous Council all about. You need to understand about the intricacies of the 6th schedule. After that, you should know about what are the issues which are pertaining with as of now. What is the issue with regard to the Autonomous Council and what is the proposed amendment got to do with regarding this particular issue. So all these schemes will be covering with regard to this particular issue. So first of all, let us understand about what is this Autonomous Council and the 6th schedule all about. First of all, this AMTM states, that is the states of Assam, Mizoram, Tripura and Meghalaya, they have been given some special administrative status with regard to the 6th schedule. Now, why is this differentiation all about? Why is this differentiation necessary in the first place? That you need to understand. It is said that the tribes who are living in the states of Assam, Meghalaya, Tripura and Mizoram, they have some sort of unique customs. They have their own customs and they have not assimilated their lives with that of the other people, and that is why it is said that let us have a unique administration, a special focus with regard to the AMTM states in the 6th schedule. So that is the reason behind the differentiation. Now what happened was that with regard to these 4 states, the government, they have said that we will organize these 4 states into autonomous districts. And what about these autonomous districts? They are having some sort of autonomous powers, at least theoretically. And these autonomous districts, they will be governed by the help of a district council. And it is also said that if within such an autonomous district, if there are many different tribes, then for each tribe, let us have an autonomous region. So for each of the tribes, you are going to have some autonomous regions as well, which is going to be governed by a regional council. So this is the structure that is behind the administration of the AMTM states in the 6th schedule. You are going to have an autonomous district, you are going to have an autonomous region with regard to each and every different tribes, and with regard to the administration, you have a district council, you have a regional council. And what about the salient points with regard to the 6th schedule? Now understand, as I have mentioned to you, the tribal areas, that is the states of AMTM, has got autonomous district, they have got some district council. Now in this district council, there is going to be a 30-member council, and with this 30-member council, there is going to be a 26-member who are going to be elected by the process of adult franchise, and there are going to be 4 more members who are going to be nominated by the governor. And both these set of people, they are going to have a term. So what is this term all about? The elected members, they hold a term for a period of 5 years, whereas the nominated members, they are going to get nominated by the governor, and therefore they will hold the power during the pleasure of the governor. And this district and regional councils, they have some sort of huge powers. Powers in the format of like land reforms, they can make some laws. They can make some laws with regard to the land, forest, shifting cultivation, animal husbandry, marriage and divorce. All that is possible with regard to this district and regional council. Just because they have so much power, we call them to be autonomous in nature. But all such laws which has been made by them, it requires the assent of the governor. Also, what is important is the acts of parliament or the state legislature, they either apply or they apply with certain modification or they do not apply at all. Now, who is going to decide this? Again, that is going to be decided by the executive authority. The acts of parliament, they may either apply with certain modification or they may not apply at all. So this is the crux behind this particular 6th schedule. Now what is the issue is that there are certain issues there are some certain lacunae with regard to the Autonomous Council. These are the various issues that we will be discussing in this particular issue. Now, what is to be noted is that there are some things which have been resolved by the proposed amendment. So, what is the issue and how has it been resolved by this particular amendment, which is the 125th Constitutional Amendment Bill? Now, issues with Autonomous Council, first point is that we need certain village bodies. There is a lack of village level body. Now, what you need to understand is we need to have a grassroots democratic system even with regard to these kind of autonomous regions. And what should you be having for that? You need to have certain village level councils. For this, the proposed amendment says that let us have some village level council, let us have some municipal council which will be empowered to prepare some socio-economic developmental plans. So, this is the new provision with regard to the proposed amendment. And the second issue is that there is a lack of financial self-sufficiency. Again, what should be noted is that the councils are dependent on the respective state governments with regard to the fund allocation. They do not have their own capacity to generate the fund. So, what happened was this particular amendment, it suggested the State Finance Commission to indulge in financial devolution. The word is important here. It said that let us give some financial devolution, meaning that funds have to directly move from the states to the autonomous councils. So, this is the new provision that has been given with regard to the proposed amendment. And the next issue is that, the third issue is that there is some non-representation of certain tribes. There is a non-representation of some women. There is an inadequate representation of women. So, both these issues have been solved to a certain extent by the proposed amendment. The proposed amendment says that this number, that is the 30 number council, this 30 number which is given in the district council, that is proposed to be increased because certain major tribes and certain minor tribes, they have not got adequate representation in this 30 member council, because of which the proposed amendment seeks to increase the number of members in the council. The next issue is that the bill reserves at least 1/3 of the seats to be actually filled up by women in the case of the village and in the municipal councils. What are the other pressing issues with regard to the autonomous council is that you have the fifth issue being the overlapping functional responsibilities between the states and the district. Now, understand what is happening is that certain matters that have been fully transferred to the district and the regional councils, but in spite of the transfer, the state, even after the transfer of the power to the district and the regional council, they still have an overarching responsibility. They still wield a lot of powers. They still extend their arm into the powers which is given to your district and the regional council. That is the fifth issue. After that, there is a lack of codification of customary law. What is important is there are tribes in this area. They have their own set of customs. So, you have to properly codify their law. You have to properly codify the customs so as to ensure the protection of the tribal cultural identity. You cannot govern them using your regular laws. You have to codify their customary laws and govern them based on their own unique cultural identity. So, that is the sixth issue. The next important aspect is there is a lack of clarity in the role of governor. Yes, of course, your executive authority holds a huge power when it comes to the administration of this kind of Northeast Autonomous Council, because he is the authority who is going to decide what law applies, what sort of regulations apply to that particular autonomous district or autonomous regional council. So, yes, true to the word, your executive authority has got a huge role. But what is lacking is that there is a lack of clarity with regard to the role of governor, because there is a conflicting opinion even amongst the experts that should the governor be acting in his own discretion, or should he be governed, should he be advised by the Council of Ministers. So, there is a conflicting opinion. There is a lack of clarity with regard to the role which is played by the governor. The next important issue is that there is a lack of skilled professionals. This is an issue which is not just with regard to your autonomous council, but this is an issue which is plaguing the entire administrative system which is present in India. Professionalism, that is the lacking word here. What is to be noted is the developmental projects which have been sanctioned with regard to the AMTM states, it has to be supervised by some experts, professionals. You need some technical professional, you need some financial experts. For that, you lack this kind of expertise, you lack this kind of expert advice. So that is to be noted here. And the next set of issue is that you have some misuse of funds. The government actually guarantees, it actually sanctions certain amount of funds with regard to the autonomous councils. The ADCs, on the other hand, they misuse the government funds. So this is another issue. There is a lack of efficient usage of existing powers. In the beginning of the lecture, I mentioned one word. Theoretically, the ADCs do have a lot of powers. They can make a huge set of reforms when it comes to the land reform, be it the case of land revenue, be it the case of animal husbandry, social forestry, all this, they have huge power. Your ADCs have got huge powers theoretically, but what are they actually using it? Are they actually using it? That is a big question mark. There is a lack of efficient usage of their existing powers. Provided that they realize what their actual power is, provided that they fully begin to utilize that particular power, the autonomous council can function in a much more efficient manner. So that is the point to be noted here. Moving on to the next issue, we are moving to the next issue, which is the Private Members Bill. Recently, there has been a lot of agenda, there has been a lot of noise with regard to the Private Members Bill. Why so? Now that is because there was one private member in the case of Rajya Sabha who raised the issue of the Ram Temple. He said that he would bring about the Ram Temple at least through a Private Members Bill. So this was the major issue that recently, because of which you had a lot of questions, you had a lot of debate with regard to Private Member Bill. Now, what is a Private Member Bill? A Private Member Bill is actually a bill which is piloted by a non-minister MP. He should not be a minister, because if he is a minister, it will become a government bill, it will become a public bill. So, a Private Members Bill is something that is piloted by a non-minister. Now, what is the whole agenda behind raising such a Private Member Bill? That is, the main agenda is to seek attention, to bring the attention of the minister, to bring the attention of the entire house with regard to some issues, some gaps which is present in the existing legal framework which needs some sort of urgent legislative intervention. To bring the focus of the government to some lacunae, some gap which is present in the system, the private members, they raise their own agenda, they raise their own bills. A quick look at the facts, a quick look at the history with regard to Private Member Bill. What is to be noted is that the last time a Private Members Bill was passed was in the year of 1970, and what is this bill has been given in the second point. And most importantly, 14 Private Members Bill have become a law so far. And with regard to the process, with regard to the procedure that is to be followed in the case of a passing of a Private Members Bill, that may be important with regard to this year's prelims as well as mains. So please pay focus with regard to this particular topic. Now, the admissibility, how do you admit one particular Private Member Bill in the House of the Parliament, that is to be noted. Procedure that is involved in admitting that particular bill, and there is also a restriction with regard to the number of bills that can be passed, a number of Private Member Bill that can be passed per session. There is also a restriction with regard to the day that is reserved for the discussion of a Private Member Bill and the introduction and the discussion on the bill. How does that take place? What will happen after the end of the discussion with regard to a Private Member Bill? And what happens if this particular bill lapses? So, all these issues we will be discussing one by one. First of all, let us take the issue of admitting a Private Members Bill. So, when you admit a Private Members Bill, it has to get the sanction. It should be decided by the chairman in the case of the Rajya Sabha and the speaker in the case of the Lok Sabha. And with regard to the procedure, here what you should note is that the member must give at least at least a duration of a month's notice before the bill actually gets introduced into that particular house. Also, the House Secretariat, it must examine the validity of that particular bill, like he should examine that if it is within the constitutional provision, number one. He should examine whether it is within the rules of the legislative procedure with regard to that particular house. So, these are some of the criteria with regard to the introduction of a private member bill. After which, what should be done? The day that is reserved for the discussion of a private member bill is a Friday. Only on Fridays you can come up with this sort of private member bill. Also, there is a criteria, there is a limitation with regard to the number of private member bill which can be passed per session. Please understand, up to 1997, private member bills could be up to 3 bills in a week, which means in a week they can introduce up to 3 bills. But what happened later on was that there was a huge piling of private members bill, and Chairman K.R. Narayan, with regard to the Rajya Sabha, he passed a unanimous decision that the number should be capped to 3 per session. So, this is the number of private members bill per session. And with regard to the process that is to be followed, now on the scheduled Friday, the private member can come up with the bill, and only a fraction of the private members bill, I am repeating, only a fraction of a private member's bill that is getting introduced is actually taken up for discussion. Why is it so? That is to be noted here. The answer to that question is present in point number 3 and 4. So, what actually happens is that Rajya Sabha usually draws a ballot to decide, and therefore they pick up one particular private member bill. So, suppose if one private bill, it actually gets the priority, it actually gets the seniority with regard to that ballot draw, then that is taken up for discussion. Now, what is to be noted is that, let us take what happened with regard to one of the recent private member bill that was introduced with regard to the sittings of the parliament. Now, it was introduced by a private member. The issue is with regard to the sittings per session with regard to the parliament. This was introduced in the Rajya Sabha in the year of March 2017, whereas it was taken up for discussion only in August 2018. Why is this big delay? Now, that is because even if a bill is successful in the parliament, it has to wait as long as the discussion and the debate on the other bills gets over, and only after all the other bills gets over, the discussion getting over, your private member bill will be picked up for discussion. So, that is why, as per the statistics, 165 bills have been introduced, 165 private member bill have been introduced in Rajya Sabha, out of which only 18 have been taken up for discussion during the past 3 years. So, you can analyze how many private members bill have been actually introduced, but only 18 have been taken up for discussion. That is the dismal number of bill that is actually taken up for discussion with regard to private member bill. Why so? That is again because it lacks the power, it lacks the required numbers, because it is after all introduced by a private member. It may or may not have the support of the general house. And what happens with regard to the lapse of a private member bill? Now, a private member bill which was introduced in the Rajya Sabha, it will lapse when the member retires. So, in short, it may have a lifespan of 6 years. And what happens if a private member bill which got introduced in the Lok Sabha, what will happen when it lapses? Now, here it will lapse only when the Lok Sabha gets dissolved. So, dissolution of the Lok Sabha is the criteria for the lapse with regard to private member bill introduced in the Lok Sabha. And after the end of discussion, after your entire discussion gets over, it is actually put to vote. In this case, what happens is, a private member, he may either choose to press ahead with the passage of the bill, or he may even withdraw the bill. Now, if he chooses to pass ahead with that particular bill, it will be put to vote, and if it is successfully passed, it will become eventually a law. So this is the usual course with regard to a private member bill. But as I've told you before, just because it doesn't have the support of the House, just because it is not passed by the government, it may not have the required support. And then moving on to the next issue, which is Aadhaar being passed as a money bill. This is a very crucial issue. The SC, which is the Supreme Court, upheld the Lok Sabha Speaker's decision to categorize Aadhaar as a money bill. This issue may look simple at the first look, but actually there are multiple issues underlying this particular passing of Aadhaar as a money bill. What are the issues? The first thing is that, can you dub every bill? Can you morph every bill as a money bill? Now this will actually set a very wrong precedence in the future. Why so? Because you are going to morph every bill as a money bill just because there is a clause of taxation, just because there is some clause of Consolidated Fund of India. Because of that major fact, if you are going to morph, if you are going to dub every bill as a money bill, then that will be equivalent to destructing the democratic structure which is present in India. Why do I say that dubbing as a money bill destroys the democratic structure of India? Because parliamentary democracy is by one way bypassed when you dub a bill as a money bill, because it is going to bypass the Rajya Sabha deliberately. With regard to the money bill, Rajya Sabha has got negligible powers. It cannot amend it, it can just only discuss it, it cannot even have any control over not passing that particular bill. That is, it will not have any restriction to curtail that particular bill. So, to bypass one bill, to bypass your Rajya Sabha, the government can easily take the route of putting a bill as a money bill. The third major issue is that the objectivity of Aadhaar is targeted delivery of subsidies, benefits and services. Now, where does a money bill fit into this particular description? That is a big question mark. Now, what the government answers with regard to all the major issues is that it says that there is a core provision. The core provision is section 7. It says that in this particular Aadhaar bill, you have a section 7 which enables the use of Aadhaar to avail any of the government subsidy, and the government makes the argument that this government subsidy, this government benefit, we are going to draw the expenditure out of the Consolidated Fund of India. And just because we have the word of Consolidated Fund of India, just because we have this draping of Consolidated Fund of India, we are going to label the Aadhaar as a money bill. So this was the argument that was put forth by the government side, and the Supreme Court have also accepted this particular argument. It was a 4:1 decision that was passed. 4 judges actually supported the majority view, and there was one dissenting opinion. So this dissenting opinion, we should be knowing about it. Justice D.Y. Chandrachud, he said that Rajya Sabha's authority has been superseded by the passage of Aadhaar as a money bill. As a result, this actually debased your democratic institution of parliament. But in short, what happened? The majority view justified the passage of the Aadhaar bill. And what is this money bill all about? Article 110 of the Constitution deals with the provisions of the money bill. The very first thing is that let us have a quick analysis, though we have already dealt the same with regard to the static modules of polity. I am bringing it back for your further revision. Article 110 talks about money bill. The first thing is that it tries to impose, alter, remit or regulate one tax. It tries to regulate the borrowing of money by the union government. Article 110 also deals about the custody of the Consolidated Fund of India or the Contingency Fund of India. Custody meaning, who is going to hold it? Is it going to be purely an executive action, or is the parliament also going to come into the picture? Or it is also going to deal about the withdrawal of money from any of these funds. The appropriation of money out of the Consolidated Fund of India, even that is ruled by Article 110. And what is to be noted is that not just appropriation, but even when you are going to receive any money into your Consolidated Fund of India or the public account of India, even that issue can come under Article 110. And declaration of any expenditure which is made to be charged on the Consolidated Fund of India. All these issues will come under the spectrum of Article 110. And the challenges with regard to the passage of Aadhaar as a money bill, let me reiterate the same points. Any bill can now be given a Consolidated Fund of India dimension, that is, any bill can now be brought under the dressing of Consolidated Fund of India. It can be dubbed as a money bill, and thereby it will destroy the bicameral system of the parliament. It will bypass your Rajya Sabha. That is what this point is intending to mean. And under a strict interpretation of Article 110, it is quite difficult to actually place your Aadhaar as a money bill, because what is the objective behind Aadhaar? As I have told you before, it is concerned about targeted delivery of subsidies with regard to each and every people of India. Now, what is to be noted is that where does a money bill come into this? For which the government gives the reply, Section 7 deals with Consolidated Fund of India. But can that be the only reason why you can place Aadhaar as a money bill? Now, if this is the case, then this is setting a very wrong precedence in the future. And the majority sections of the Aadhaar Act dealt with several aspects which is relating to the Aadhaar numbers were actually alien to the scope of Article 110. So, all these can be said to be some of the interesting points by which the government can be said to have an ulterior motive of bypassing the Rajya Sabha by pushing the Aadhaar as a money bill. And let us move on to the next issue. As it is being an election season, we are bringing in some issues with regard to representations of People's Act, and we are also dealing about this indelible ink which they use for polling. Now, what is this ink all about? It is an indelible ink, meaning you cannot rub it off easily. It is going to stick onto your skin for a very long time. Now, the chemical composition with regard to this particular ink is that there is a silver nitrate. So, silver nitrate is a colorless soluble salt which is actually used in that particular ink. When it is put on the skin, the silver nitrate will eventually react on the salt, forming silver chloride. Now, there is also a solvent alcohol which is present in that particular ink. Now, this alcohol will actually aid in faster evaporation, so that what happens is you cannot rub it off very easily. It will actually immerse into your skin as soon as you put it on. And silver chloride is again not soluble in water. That is again an advantage because it is going to cling on to your skin. It cannot be washed off, and you must wait for a few weeks until the dead skins they get removed automatically. And with regard to the production of the ink, one factory is responsible for producing this ink, which is Mysore Paint and Varnish Limited. And this is applied on the left forefinger of the voter, and if that left forefinger is actually not present, what is the order of precedence which is to be followed? First of all, they can use any other finger of the left hand, then they can move on to the right forefinger, and then they move on to any other finger which is present in the right hand. And for some people who do not have the fingers, they can even place it on left arm or right arm. And the chemical on the exposure of the sunlight leaves a mark which may be very difficult to remove off. Moving on to the next important issue, we are moving on to the Representation of People's Act 1951. This is quite an important issue. Please understand, there are some sections which might be asked even in your prelims. First of all, we are taking about one crucial section, which is the section 8 of RPA. Now, this section talks about decriminalization of politics. Now, what do you mean by decriminalization? That means there is an excessive amount of criminals or law breakers becoming lawmakers of the country. To avoid that, you have to cleanse the system, which is meant by decriminalization. So, this section, it actually disqualifies or bans convicted politicians from contesting an election. But what is to be noted with regard to this picture is that this section 8 clause 4, it once upon a time it was present, and it actually protected those MPs and MLAs from being disqualified provided they file an appeal within 3 months. But what happened was, with Lily Thomas case, this section was abrogated, this section was removed completely. Now, we will be dealing about the importance of this Representation of People's Act later on as well, but now let us focus only with regard to prelims perspective. Let us have a very crisp discussion. First of all, observations made by the Supreme Court with regard to decriminalization of politics. Lawbreakers cannot be lawmakers, and first of all, people must be given the right to know about the criminal antecedents of that particular candidate, for which you must have a wide publicity of whatever criminal acts which have been committed by that particular candidate. It should be revealed to the ACI, it should be revealed to the political party itself. In addition, both the candidates and the parties, they were mandated to publish this information both in newspapers and in TVs at least 3 times after nomination papers are being filed. Internal democracy, financial transparency and accountability should be the mantra with regard to elimination of criminals from politics. So, this problem of criminalization of politics is not incurable, but it requires some urgent attention. And moving on to the next section, we have section 33 clause 7 of the RPA. Now, what is this section all about? Now, this actually permits a candidate to contest in election from up to 2 constituencies. All of these personalities, in one or the other way, they have contested from 2 constituencies. If you take the case of Rahul Gandhi, at present he is going to contest from Amethi as well as he is going to contest from Wayanad. So, this is a case with regard to candidates contesting in 2 constituencies. This provision was introduced in 1996. Prior to that, there were cases wherein candidates contested even from 3 constituencies. One notable example I could cite is the case of N.T. Ramarao and Vajpayee. Both of these personalities have contested from 3 different constituencies in one single election. And after 1996, what happened was they resorted to this 2 constituency norm. What is the issue with regard to this 2 constituency norm? The basic issue is that there is a logical inconsistency of candidates contesting from 2 seats. What is this logical inconsistency? Now, they know, the candidates themselves know, the people know, the ECI know that they cannot obviously stand in election from 2 constituencies. If they win the 2 constituencies, they will obviously have to vacate one particular seat. Now, when there is a very much logical interpretation that they cannot hold powers in 2 constituencies, what is the need in the first place for the candidates to contest in 2 constituencies? This is the logical inconsistency. They have to vacate one seat definitely, provided they win the 2 seats. And what is again important is, suppose they win both the seats, then what happens is it will automatically trigger a by-election in the other seat which has been vacated by the concerned candidate. That is again to be noted. So, this will obviously put a strain on the public exchequer. And what is to be noted is that it is the taxpayers' money which is getting wasted. Because of the triggering of the by-election, the public exchequer's money is going to get wasted, which means the taxpayers' money is going to get wasted. And this will also result in voter fatigue, because in a short span of time, the voters, they have to poll for the same seat again within a span of a few days. Why should the voter be tormented with regard to this kind of an electoral process? In short, the voters will lose the interest in the electoral process, because they will be actually pushed, they will be forced to again vote for a by-election. So, these are some of the issues with regard to the 2 constituency norm. And the arguments against the 2 constituency is that, as I have told you before, it is imperative for the candidate to vacate one seat if he wins both the seats, and it is providing some unavoidable financial burden on the public exchequer. Moreover, it is an abrupt injustice to the voters, because they are actually polling, they are actually electing an ex-candidate. Now, when they have enough trust, when they have enough belief that this candidate will lead the constituency to prosperous future, how can he vacate his seat? This is an injustice to the electoral system. This is an injustice to the voters. So, these are the arguments against the 2 constituency norm. And what is the alternative that is suggested by the ECI is that, provided that this candidate vacates the second seat, he must bear the cost of the by-election to the seat that the contestant decides to vacate. And the same has been again seconded. The opinion that has been put forth by the ECI has been again seconded by Law Commission in its 255th report. So, the norm is that there should be one person, one vote. Just like that, you must be having one candidate, one constituency. We should be resorting to this dictum, says your ECI. Let us move to the next important section with regard to Representation of Peoples Act. This is section 151 clause A of the RPA. Now, what is this section all about? This section mandates the Election Commission to fill the casual vacancies in the houses of the Parliament and state legislature through a by-election, which is to be held within 6 months from the vacancy. Now, again, what is to be noted is that this is to be done provided the remainder of the term is actually 1 year or more. Now, what is the controversy with regard to this section is that experts have written that while you are conducting elections for some vacant constituencies, like in the case of Karnataka, why are you not contesting election when there are vacant constituencies in Andhra Pradesh? If you are conducting elections for Karnataka, you should be doing the same for Andhra Pradesh. So, they have or they say that there is a political vendetta in play. They say that there is a political game in play with regard to the conducting elections in some constituencies and leaving behind some other constituencies. So, what the ECI has replied to the same statement is that the case with Karnataka is quite different, because here vacancies have occurred more than 1 year before the expiration of the term of the House. The period of vacancy is more than 1 year. That is why we have conducted the constituency by-election. Whereas when you take of the case of AP, that is Andhra Pradesh, there is no need to hold the by-election. The ECI said, as the remaining term of the Lok Sabha is less than 1 year. So, this has been the reply which is given by the ECI. But still, experts, still politicians and political advisors, they feel that there is an injustice with regard to the by-poll election taking place in some states, whereas it is not taking place in some other states. So, that is the end for the discussion of today. We will be continuing with the rest of the polity related current affairs issue in the upcoming modules. Thank you so much. Have a nice day.